This is TAU Unbound, the English language podcast of Tel Aviv University. Please welcome your host, Aharoni, Tel Aviv University's graduate, member of the Board of Governors, lecturer, writer, and veteran diplomat.
Welcome to yet another episode of TAU Unbound. I'm Aharoni, your host, and it is my distinct pleasure to host in our studio today Professor Yair Bar Haim. Thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure.
It's such a pleasure. Let me just share with our viewers and listeners your distinguished title. So he has several titles. He is a professor of psychology and neuroscience. He is a board-certified clinical psychologist. He is a member of the School of Psychological Sciences at the Sagol School of Neuroscience at Tel Aviv University. But more importantly, which is the real reason why he's here today, he is the director of the National Center for Traumatic Stress and Resilience at Tel Aviv University, which I believe is the first of its kind in the country.
To do research and treatment in the same house, it's the first one.
So we usually begin our discussions with some personal questions. Tell us a little bit about your career. Why did you choose this path? And how did you end up here? Academically, professionally?
I studied psychology throughout the PhD and graduated from Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and then went out to the United States and did a long postdoc at the University of Maryland and the NIH. And then I came back here to Tel Aviv in 2000, started my career here as a scientist, researcher. I was always interested in anxiety and stress-related disorders in children and adults.
So you started your career as faculty at Tel Aviv University in 2000, which was the year that the Second Intifada broke out.
Yes, in the beginning I was more focused on anxiety in youth, children, adolescents. But as time went on, I realized that my main interest is in post-traumatic stress disorder. I've seen the effects of traumatic stress disorder during my military service, but then later, as I moved on to study it and treat people, I realized that this is my call in terms of science and also practice.
And obviously, with what's happening today, we'll talk about certainly 10/7, October 7th, and its implications. But we have so many, in the past several decades, so many major events that traumatized scores of people, from 9/11 to the war, the Gulf War, what's happening in Ukraine, and so on and so forth. So can you say something about what's happening today in the world when it comes to PTSD?
Well, first, it's important to realize that it's not only war-related or military-related. Traumas can occur in civilian life. People attack other people. Accidents, car accidents, natural disasters, all could lead to post-traumatic stress disorder. In Israel, one of the major causes for PTSD, alongside the civilian cases, is the military service. In Israel, every year, due to regular military service in combat units, we have an estimate of about 2,500 new cases of PTSD just from the regular service.
When you say PTSD, you're referring to a behavioral disorder caused by either injury or stress, right? That's the definition?
Yes, it's a psychiatric disorder that at its core is a traumatic event, but then has a complex set of symptoms that are displayed together to create the disorder. And
what are the main challenges in identifying people with PTSD? Because I'm assuming that not every person that is affected is aware of it.
Yes, so it starts with awareness of the disorder itself, what it entails, and what kinds of symptoms appear in the disorder. But then there are also other barriers. People are ashamed. They think they can get over it or think they can get over it by themselves. which leads to time passing until they ask for help or try help. And some people stay with the symptoms for many years before they approach.
What are the most common symptoms?
The most common symptoms are flashbacks and re-experiencing the traumatic event as if it's happening in the moment, nightmares, difficulties sleeping, strong avoidance of any situation or thought that could lead to triggering these feelings, and then hyperarousal and depression. So it's a complex set of symptoms, but it's also quite devastating. It has serious implications for the person's ability to function.
Now, let me ask you a question that bothers me as someone who's really concerned with the impact of social media, and especially because as part of my volunteer work, I went on 2 major tours, speaking tours of North America post 10/7, and in preparation for those tours, I watched some of the videos that were uploaded by Hamas. Yeah. Question, and it haunts me, those images. Question is, can a person be traumatized just by viewing an image?
It's a very good question. Some of the images are very appalling and traumatizing, and there is a category that if you see a lot of footage as part of your work, that could count as a trauma, an indirect type of trauma. What's missing usually is the feeling that you are under real attack or a real danger to yourself because you're just watching the screen or something.
So it's distant. There's not an immediate present,
right,
clear and present danger physically to you, but it's distant. That's the only difference.
Yes, and it's a big difference in terms of the person's reactions and also all the biology that comes with it. But there is a category that allows for, if someone is really into it and that's his job, needs to do it on a daily basis, then yes, we see cases like that.
So professionals, healthcare professionals like yourself, what kind of help can we offer people that do experience PTSD for whatever reason, whether it's military or civilian?
Yeah, there are several types of treatments for PTSD. The main or the first line of treatments are cognitive behavior therapy that is trauma-focused. Usually there are protocols for this that last between 12 and 16 sessions that are quite effective in treating PTSD, particularly when it's a fresh type PTSD that just the event just happened and things are.
All right, for the benefit of our listeners and viewers who are not proficient in psychology,
yeah,
tell us a little bit what do you mean by cognitive treatment, cognitive behavioral treatment?
So these treatments are protocolized. They have sessions that deal with cognitions and thoughts that accompany the trauma and that are biased or incorrect. And we help people process them and try to reach a more coherent picture of what happened, what was their role in the situation. Are they guilty or not, even though they feel guilt sometimes? These are things that are being done in cognitive behavior therapy, and then also exposures. So,
would that include the computerized, the computational neurological pathway treatment that they use for learning disabilities?
It's the main treatments are person to person.
Person to person.
And there are also group therapies, and there are some technologically advanced therapies that are not the first line. They're usually the second or third line of treatment, where we harness technology to try and change biases in attention that sometimes accompany PTSD, that also reduces symptoms. But the first line, for sure, is cognitive behavioral therapy, and medication is not very effective yet for.
And would you say that, based on your experience, and obviously you have lots of experience, how would you describe the success ratio of the first line of treatment?
Yeah, this is a painful point here, because For other disorders like anxiety and depression, we are quite efficient, and we are efficient to 70 or 75% of the patients. For PTSD, the picture is different. We're efficacious for about 40 to 50%. And this is because this treatment is complex and the disorder is difficult to track and treat. I really hope that the center that we are forming here at Tel Aviv University will focus on clinical research in this particular field to bridge that gap and try to bring PTSD to a more effective treatment.
Yeah, so this is actually a good segue into the subject you just brought up, the creation of the National Center for Traumatic Stress and Resilience. And it's interesting that you couple stress and resilience at the same time. And tell us about the relationship between why resilience is so important. It's like, sounds to me like we want to give people the immune system to deal with stress.
Right. So, this is quite difficult to build resilience, but the idea is that you could prepare the population, especially people who are bound to harm's way. So if these are combat soldiers or maneuvering components of the military that for sure will meet traumatic events in the near future, you can focus on them and try to build their resilience towards the trauma. And the truth is that the largest number of people who face trauma are doing fine. They are resilient to the effect of the trauma. About 90% of the people, or even 95% of the people exposed, will not develop PTSD in the end. So this part is really important if you can, if there are ways to do it. I can speak to that if you like.
I think it's very important to learn from your experience and to share with our audience what are the things that we can do in order to shield ourselves.
Yes, so the level of the entire population, it's hard to tell. For me, at least, it's very hard to tell. But for combat-bound soldiers, we developed technology to train their attention towards threats in the environment and to process them better on the battlefield. And this program showed efficacy in protective edge operation, where we tested it in a large clinical trial. And then in another set of studies, these results were confirmed. So the IDF basically adopted that system, and it has been delivered to the maneuvering components in Gaza before they entered. So the idea is that this can reduce threefold the number of cases of PTSD. It's a small effect, but it's important.
By the way, side question before we continue, because I'm just thinking about the years that you spent in the United States, NIH, and I'm thinking about the growing homelessness problem in the United States. And I read somewhere an article that looks at it as first, not as a housing problem, but as a mental health problem. And many of those homeless people are people suffering from trauma. And the question is, do you see any difference between the way PTSD is handled institutionally by Israel as opposed to other countries such as the United States?
Yeah, so first it's important to say that the United States, through its Department of Defense and the NIH, have invested in our research largely, and the results we got here in Tel Aviv are shared with these institutions in the United States and applied also in certain cases in the U.S. military. But to your question, I think the United States, at least, handles the veteran affairs in a different manner. There is an Office of Veteran Affairs. Here it's under the umbrella of the Ministry of Defense. I think their system is, all these systems are large and difficult and bureaucratic, but I think their system is better than ours in terms of how they think about it. It's not something that needs to be under the Ministry of Defense. It's something that needs its own attention. Now here it's all politics, it's all about what are the budgets and who's going to handle them and who's going to control them. But in my mind, the Veteran Affairs office would be a good office to start here in Israel. I think part of its job is to handle the frustration and anger of the people who got hurt, and not just treat them, but also be kind of a institution that understands that part of the anger is going to be directed towards towards it.
So let's go back to the center, and I know that the center was supposed to be ready only a couple of years from now, but because of 10/7, the decision was made to do it now and to do it immediately. And so the first thing is, I wanted to ask you, what is your assessment of the number of new cases added to the system as a result of 10/7? How many people are we talking about?
With full-blown PTSD, the conservative estimate would be around 30,000 new cases.
That's huge.
That's yes. There's it's a problem that is going to stay with us for at least the next 3-4 decades. And we're going to have to deal with it gradually. There are no resources to handle all the problem. So people are trying, institutions are trying. We are going to handle about 10% of the load here in Tel Aviv with the center's clinic. So the center really is a larger endeavor. It has 4 elements: research, clinic, policy, and training. We moved the clinic early because of October 7. And the clinic is already operational. And we're operational for 2 months. We received about 800 referrals already. So it's...
And who are your main sources? Who's making most of the referrals to you? Is it the government, the army?
Mostly the army, the Ministry of Defense is referring to us, but the main referral stream comes from individuals who self-refer, mostly reservists coming back from Gaza. This is the largest part of the clinic at the moment.
Which makes publicity, I think, a big part of what you do. But people will know that you exist, will make it easier for them to approach you.
Yeah, so we are, publicizing the clinic on social media and on television, on podcasts like this. But we don't have a shortage of people approaching us. It's the other way around. We're starting to struggle handling all the people that approach us.
And so you mentioned that you're overloaded with requests, which begs the question of what are the immediate needs of the center?
The center currently is providing treatment to a large number of patients, both civilians and military related. What we need is for our building to be ready. That will be in the beginning of 2026. And we need donations from people who help us subsidize these treatments for those who don't have.
So, and I know that many of our listeners and our viewers right now are friends of the university, friends of the State of Israel. I myself participated in an event with the American Friends of Tel Aviv University in Florida earlier this month, and where we spoke about the center. And in fact, the president of the university devoted a big chunk of his speech to the center and to the need of the Friends of the university to support the center. So I'd like to add my request to our listeners and viewers to the extent they can to help us heal. Now, I read all the time that PTSD has also another, peripheral range of disorders that are associated with it. So it's not just, the anxiety, the behavioral disorder. It's a predictor to other disease as well.
Well, The most common comorbidity, if you like, is depression, but also drug abuse sometimes. But I thought you're going to say something a little different. When you think about the person with PTSD, that's one issue, and we're trying to provide therapy and deal with the person. But imagine that person is a family member of, he has a wife and 3 children. They're all affected, parents, and they're all affected because sometimes that person will not be able to hold his previous job, or some of the behaviors are frightening, some of the behaviors have consequences for the people who live with the affected person. So the circles become much larger in terms of the effect you get on society.
So are we ready to help the periphery of the person affected by PTSD?
Yeah, we are closely looking into it, and we do have expertise in family therapy, couples therapy, and our clinic currently focuses on adults, but it will open its gates for children and adolescents in about 6 months.
Now, you mentioned research, which is one of the 4 pillars of the center. What is the next frontier for the research in your area of PTSD?
Yeah, so the center is going to have extensive research on treatment efficacy from the molecular level through systems neuroscience all the way to AI and behavioral treatment and treatment efficacy testing in randomized controlled clinical trials. And the idea is that within 10-year period, we will cover a lot of grounds in terms of efficacy. We will test the treatments that we develop against first-line treatments provided in the center. And we also have in our intention to test which treatment should come first and then try to see what's the most efficacious way to deliver or funnel people through the system. This cannot be done without extensive research, new treatment development, testing, and testing it with patients and testing all these issues. So this is our plan for the next, you could say 50 years, but I hope that within 10 years we'll be able to start closing the gap towards the state of psychiatry in general.
Now, I'm assuming that when you're dealing with such an issue, and again, we live in a global world with high level of interconnectedness, I'm assuming you're establishing strategic partnerships with other institutions in other countries. If you can tell us a little bit about your relationships with other institutions in other countries so that our viewers and listeners will have a picture as to the global network.
Yes, we have very close relationships with the key players, the biggest players in the PTSD around the globe. First, we are in close connection with the National Institutes of Health, with very close collaborations and mutual studies, people coming back and forth between the institution and the center. So that's one big thing. We have a close connection to Walter Reed Institute of Army Research in the States. This is the main institution for military studies in the realm of mental health. We have close connections with the Australian National Centre for PTSD in Melbourne. We have ties with Columbia University Center and the New York Institute of Psychiatric Research on PTSD, and we are connected with the Oxford Center for PTSD that does a lot of work for the UK. All these people researchers are very close friends of me and also the center.
Do we know what's happening in Ukraine in that department?
Yeah.
Do we have any idea? Because I hear very little about that.
Yeah, well, they are in serious, very grave situation there. PTSD is with high prevalence, both among the civilians and among the fighting troops. The war there doesn't seem to be anywhere close to an end, which adds to the situation. A lot of organizations try to offer help, mental health help. In the beginning, I was in the position that thought that let's see that it ends, the war ends, and then we'll start assisting, but it's not going anywhere at the moment. So we, of course, offered assistance to scientists and clinicians that approached us, mainly through the UK. There are people in the UK who have close ties to the Ukrainian efforts in terms of mental health, and we provided them with all our protocols and assistance that we could provide.
By the way, and I say this as someone who I went into Lebanon in June of 1982 as a young soldier, and I had no idea that this would last 18 years until Israel left Lebanon in the spring of 2000. So it was 18 years, and I think chances are that Israel will remain present in the Gaza Strip in one way or another. Assuming that we are entering a phase of what we call attrition, managing a long-term conflict with the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, what is your assessment as to what will happen to the demand on the ground for your treatment?
Well, let's start with the situation before October 7th. Before October 7th, the military activity in the West Bank created something like 2,500 new PTSD cases a year. So if you multiply, 4 years is 10,000 new cases, 8 years, 20,000. So this is an ongoing issue. Now, the way Gaza is going to stabilize will determine the percentages. It's about 5% of the maneuvering component that develops PTSD without a major war in Israel.
And then you add to that all the civilians that experienced the repercussions of war, that were targeted by missiles and rockets, and some of them witnessed the terrorists, some of them survived the terrorists, some of them...
Right. So hence the 30,000 in terms of numbers.
Yeah. Well, Professor Bar Haim, this was a difficult conversation, I must say, but one that we must engage in. And first, I'd like to thank you on behalf of all of us here in Israel for everything that you're doing. I think that what you're doing is just incredible. And we wish you great success in the new center. And again, I'd like to urge all of our listeners, friends of the university from all over the world, to visit the website, read about Professor Bar Haim's work, and to the extent you can, please help them to accomplish the goal of providing treatment to as many people as possible. I could continue with this conversation for a long time, but unfortunately we're running out of time. I wanted to thank you for being with us.
Of course.
Hopefully we'll have you again as our guest. And to our viewers and listeners back home, goodbye from Tel Aviv until our next episode.